did something to the deen or attacked the deen in some way, then he got angry, right? But us, we get, angry at every little thing. Actually, I heard a sheikh once, sheikh from South Africa, when I was on a trip. He said that I was on a trip to the Bahamas and they had a sheikh there, and he it was part of like that. There's like a group that does like a yearly trip. They rent the whole place. It's great. But he said that when we're young, one of the shuyukh from Zaman, he said that when we're young, when we're kids, we get into 10 fights a day, but we're always, at the end of the day, we're still happy and smiling. Within an hour, or within even minutes, they're back to playing and smiling. But as an adult, we get into one fight and we ignore them for 10 years, right? And get mad for 10 years. So, subhanAllah, this is that's.
I have a question about to the laughing or smiling.
Yeah.
Some people is to the joking and people laughing, voice, So if that is the okay, or this is because one hadith about that. If you so much laughing, you forget your that like this hadith about that. So you forget you the laughing.
Yeah.
So we can allow that big loud laughing or joking. That you could just people only laughing, even the joke is not true, they false joke. So they can allow that.
Yeah, that's a good question about laughing. I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to ask a sheikh. I don't know. I'm probably guilty of that more than anybody. I don't know the answer.
But smiling is...
Smiling, definitely. Smiling is definitely smile. Even it's sunnah to smile.
What is the level of smile? I mean, what is the level of smiling?
The smile as big as you, like, a big beaming smile.
Well, you wouldn't be, when the
That was
Prophet
laughing.
smiled,
That was laughing.
huh?
That was laughing.
That was one thing.
You wouldn't be able to see his lower.
That was laughing. That's smiling. I mean, that's honestly one of the I feel the things that we've been taught is wrong. That seriousness and this is part of our deen. That's true, but the Prophet ﷺ himself was constantly smiling. He's a very, very happy person. So he was the most religious person out of everyone. He knew about Jannah and Nar more than anybody else. And he was constantly happy, and he was happy all the time. So that's something that we need to think about, that how the most religious person amongst us was. And ideally, our deen would give us this happiness, right? Our deen is not a burden on us. I've seen a lot of people, they're very happy and positive, all this stuff, and the second they become religious, they start becoming like grumpy, frowny people all the time. And that's not how the deen should be. The deen should actually make us happier. It should make us happy. Like in the Quran, Allah says, ادخل في السلم كافة. Enter into Islam completely. Enter in just fully. Put your heart into it. We have 10 minutes?
33 there, Bishra.
33, mashallah.
Stay positive.
So I'll cover a few more of these biases that we have. So we talk about anchoring. Anchoring puts it right. There's another bias. How many of you heard, or said before, back then things are so much better. Back when I was a child, things are so much better. Back 10 years ago, things were actually so much better. This is actually a bias that we have, one of our cognitive biases. That we think that things were better back in the day. Worse than they are now. Things are worse now than they are. But it's actually not true. Because if that was true, then people, living in the 1950s with life expectancy of 60 years and who, didn't have electricity and all this stuff, all these amenities, if they saw us, they're like, oh, this is amazing. We're walking to a masjid, it's air conditioned, it's heated, there's carpet, there's lights on. We're not coming in with the gas lamp and having to wear, it's cold outside and we're not wearing, huge jackets in. So it's actually a bias in our heads that we think that, oh, life was, so much better back in the day. It's actually not true. It's something we think about. Actually, we're in a period of time where this period of time right now is one of the most peaceful and prosperous times in all of humanity. People live longer now. They have better lives. They have there's less war going on. And if you lived in the if you lived between 1920 and 1950, there was 2 world wars they had to go through. Can you imagine that? SubhanAllah, we've lived this very happy, prosperous life. Think about something. I want you to think about one thing. Living here today in America, you might not think of yourselves as rich or wealthy. Who think themselves here as very rich, extremely rich? But actually you are. If you compare yourselves to the globe, where most of the people in the world live less than $1 a day or $2 a day, the people living in America, everybody sitting here, is probably in the top 10% of wealth in the entire world. If you have an average salary, car, house, you are right now in the top, we all hear Bernie, the top 1%. We are of that top percent of the whole world. So subhanAllah, when we think about on the Day of Judgment, when Allah says that the wealthy, the poor will get led in first, and then the wealthy will have all these things that will happen to them. We are of those wealthy people. No matter what your income is right now, if you're making, if you're making minimum wage right now, you are still of the wealthiest people in the entire world. I want you to think about that. If you have a cousin or uncle back in Egypt or Pakistan or whatever, you are much, much, much wealthier than them. And if you're comparing yourself to people in much poorer countries, Muslims who live in much poorer countries or much worse conditions, imagine if you were born as a Muslim in Myanmar, and you had to deal with this, being kicked out of your home and having your house burned and all that stuff. We are living, mashallah, comfortable, easy life. Our biggest worry is, our jobs, or our biggest worry is that, what do our kids. That is,
I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that sometimes our negativity is because we focus on what we don't have instead of what we do have.
Mashallah, very
And
good.
so there's this ayah in the Quran, I forget what surah it's in, but it's like, Allah tells us, like, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُم, right? So Allah tells us that, like, if you're thankful, we're going to increase you in what you have, right?
Yeah.
So if you're just thankful for what you have, you give shukr for it, you give hamd for it, Allah's going to give you more than that also.
Mashallah, that's very good, actually. Yeah, that's very true. He was bringing up the ayah, وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُم. If you're thankful, we will increase you in things. Actually, I heard a khutbah just a few weeks ago, where he was saying, like, imagine you woke up tomorrow, okay? And the only thing that you had when you woke up is the things that you gave shukr for the night before. You gave thanks for the night before. So if you didn't give thanks for your wife and your kids, and maybe you didn't want to give thanks to your wife, you want to wake up the next morning without your spouse, without your husband. But imagine you didn't thank Allah for your house and your job and your car and your kids and your wife and all this stuff. So you won't wake up and you won't find anything there, right? So subhanAllah, I just want you to do just 1 second, do an exercise with me. I just want you to close your eyes, right? Just close your eyes. Now imagine you lived your whole life like that. Okay? Imagine you lived your whole life like that. You cannot see. And just get up and walk around. SubhanAllah, there are people who have to live their whole life like that. SubhanAllah, the thanks for our eyes, you cannot even thank Allah for your eyes, your eyesight. The fact that all of us are here walking with our legs intact, our everything is intact. SubhanAllah, we are of the most blessed people in probably the whole world. We're not worrying about bombs going off. We're not worrying about if you're living in a country where they're going through hyperinflation, where all your money is worthless right now. We're not worrying about any of this. SubhanAllah, we should be thankful. And being thankful will lead us to be happy with our lives. Right? It will lead us to be happy. Again, it's that anchoring. If we're thinking of ourselves If we're thinking about somebody who's higher in wealth than us, actually they did studies, interestingly enough. If you had, let's whatever your salary is right now, wherever your house is right now, right? They call it, what do they call it? The neighborhood problem or something? I forget what it is. Like let's say in your neighborhood, you think the average you make around like everybody else in your neighborhood. And you're fine, you're happy, and you're going through life happy. Then you find out your neighbor is making double your income, right? Now all of a sudden you become unhappy, right? Because now you're thinking of the person above you, and so you're becoming unhappy because your perspective changed. There's actually an interesting equation that I heard once. One of these famous personality speakers, he said that unhappiness it's an equation. The equation is expectations versus reality. If your expectations are here and your reality is here, you're going to be unhappy. But if your reality is here, your expectations are here, you'll be happy. That's all it is. That's all happiness is. Can you imagine that? Like, so if you give an example, let's say, for instance, that you make $30,000 a year. Okay? Somebody might be very happy with that. If you're coming from a very poor country and you just immigrated here, and now you got a job and you're making $30,000, oh my God, I'm rich, right? But let's say you were once making $500,000 and you lost your job and you couldn't do whatever and you had to go work at a minimum wage job and now you're making $30,000. Do you think that same person will be happy? Absolutely not, right? So this is expectations versus reality. So either we change our expectations or we change our reality. So let's say we're unhappy with our family, right? Either we can change our expectations of our family. Our kids don't have to be perfect. Our wife doesn't have to be perfect. Our husbands don't have to be perfect. Or we can change the reality. We could try to fix them or fix our lives, whatever it is. One of those two has to go, right, in order for us to be happy. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ told us not to look at the ones higher than us, but to look at the people who are in the worst condition than you, because then you'll appreciate things more, right? When you see, subhanAllah, one of the most times that affected me in my life was after I graduated college. I went to Egypt for almost a year to study Arabic, right? So I knew the linguistic Arabic, but I didn't know how to read and write very well. So I went to Egypt to study it. That changed my life in so many ways because I'm going from this privileged American first world life to a life in Egypt. And although it's not a poor country by any means, right? But there's certain things that I just took for granted. I'll give you just a few examples. The first example, although it might seem minor, right? I came in October and they had what is that fruit called? Teen? Teen is
Fig.
Fig, yeah, fig. So they had figs, right? Coming is figs. A month later, there's no more figs. I said, where's the fig? I want to go buy some figs. They didn't have any more. I was like, why didn't they have? It's not in season. What do you mean it's not in season? That concept had not entered my mind that fruit comes in seasons. Can you imagine that? My whole life I had lived, you go to the supermarket, you want a banana, you can get a banana any time of year. Bananas don't grow any time of year, or apples don't grow every time of year, right? Apples grow in the fall. But if you go in the summer, you can get an apple, right? So I grew from the mentality that you can get any fruit anytime you want, right? But that's not the case. That's not how the real world works. That's just a small example. The other examples I saw, I used to pass by this very, very poor area when I would go to school. Very, very poor area, and you would see little kids who are, for instance, 5, 6, 7 years old, and they would be out, they would be out in the streets, they would be out, and they're not going to school. There's a very poor area that they're actually working. I saw one time and it really affected me. I was walking the streets and they have these, the garbage people, the zabanin, right? So there'll be a dumpster. It's not like here you have the truck, it comes, it picks it up with the lift, No, they have manual people who go in these big burlap sacks and they go into the dumpster and they collect it all and they take it out, right? So I saw a kid who was maybe 9 years old and he jumps into the dumpster, he does this and he gets out and he goes, subhanAllah. Can you imagine 9 years old, what I was doing? arguing with my parents about video games and this and that. SubhanAllah, like, it changed my life completely. And after that, SubhanAllah, when I came back here, for like maybe a few months, I could not spend $1 on anything. Like, it was really crazy. I would go and like, I wouldn't buy a cup of coffee. I was like, SubhanAllah, this $1 could feed a family for a day. Like, it was just, my mindset had changed, And then, slowly over time, now I'm spending, $3 on a cup of coffee and whatever, it's like nothing. That's why your perspective changes depending on your situation, So that's why, like, the Prophet said, if, like, you should go and caress the heads of the orphans, go meet the orphans, because then you'll just appreciate life much more. SubhanAllah, our perspective changes by where we are. So what I'm trying to get to is that, our positivity, this is something that's very important for our lives, because we need to be happy in our lives. We need to be happy, and we don't need to be happy by changing our circumstances.